Welcome to another episode of Murder Talk Radio. I am Parker Evans.
I'm Victoria Evans.
And today we're doing this a little different than we normally do. We're going to talk about two cases because the individual cases are relatively short and we didn't want to put out a super short episode. So instead we're going to talk about two cases. The first case that we're going to discuss is the death of 6-year-old Corey Micciolo.
This is a heartbreaking story.
It is.
Corey's father, Christopher Greger of Monroe, New Jersey, was just convicted just a couple days ago. And he was charged in Middlesex County with the murder of his son, who was from Englishtown.
He died April 2nd, 2021.
Yeah. In Stafford Township. There's video showing the abuse that came out, and this has been known as like the treadmill abuse case, because his father forced his 6-year-old son to run on the treadmill because, in his words, he was too fat.
You know, not that this matters, a kid being fat, he shouldn't be forced to run on a treadmill until he injures himself anyway, but at least to me, when we were going over this case, part of the tragedy of this, a very small part, is that this kid is not in any way fat. Not only is he not too fat, but just based on his pictures, he looks thin to me.
He does, and he's running. Like, he doesn't seem to be struggling with the running at first.
Yeah, not the running itself.
Yeah, but his dad comes up and... Well, it looks like, yeah, we'll get more into that.
So initially, Greger's attorney, a guy named Mario Gallucci, denied that Greger was involved at all in the death of his son. He told the Asbury Park Press, quote, "It took 8 months for the prosecutor's office to find an expert witness that agreed with their narrative. We'll have our own experts." It didn't work out the way that he implied it would.
No, it did not. Christopher Greger, who's now 31, he turned down a 30-year plea deal.
He had initially he had been charged with child endangerment, but after new evidence surfaced, that's the video, and if you click on the link in the description for our subscribers, and this is a subscriber-only podcast, so if you're listening to this, you're one of our subscribers. Although I think we'll probably eventually put this out on the YouTube channel, but it's going to be a minute. Yeah, if you click the link, you'll be able to see the video.
It's pretty hard to watch.
It's very hard to watch. But yeah, initially he was just charged with child endangerment, but once the prosecutors got a hold of the footage that shows his father forcing him to run on this treadmill, and that shows him falling off the machine because he couldn't keep up with the settings either for speed or tilt that his father was adjusting while he ran. He was charged with murder and also with aggravated manslaughter, which is actually what he was convicted of. He was not convicted of murder in the death of his son. He was convicted of aggravated manslaughter.
It's, the affidavit is, I don't want to say even more disturbing than the video, but it almost is, because this part of it I didn't see in the video.
It's in the video.
Is it?
Yeah.
I guess I missed it. It's kind of, I just see the kid falling multiple times off the treadmill from the way that it's been tilted, and his dad keeps like upping the speed of it, it looks like.
Well, you can't,
but apparently he appears to bite his son's head.
What I was going to say just then is it's not super clear that what he's doing is biting his son's head. When we were doing the research for this, I watched that more than once. And specifically, I watched that segment of it multiple times to try and figure out what exactly he was doing. And it looked to me, he may not have been biting his head. He may just have been, like, put his put his face very close to the kid's head to, speak quite roughly to him. But it's unclear from the video, and it is absolutely possible that what he's doing is biting this kid. Although, as I say, it's unclear from the footage.
Yeah, I just thought that he was being verbally abusive.
That's the part that they're talking about. So it kind of speaks to how unclear it is that you didn't even realize that those are the same thing. But that's what the affidavit is referring to when it talks about him biting his son's head, because they're talking about the footage. So it's that part where he's got his face against the top of the kid's head. And again, to me, it looked like he was maybe like yelling at the kid.
Yeah.
You're going to run, or whatever the fuck he was saying.
Yeah, reading that it appears.
Hang on. Or whatever he was saying.
Reading that, the affidavit said that it appears that he bit his son's head. If anyone else out there was confused like me, that is referring to the video. And it is unclear, but what is clear is that the father is just severely abusing this kid. Like he's picking him up and trying to force him to run. It's horrible.
Yeah, this kid falls off this treadmill again and again and again. I don't even know how many times. During the multiple views that I just mentioned, I tried to count, and the video was disturbing enough to me that I wasn't even able to count how many times the kid fell. I ended up writing it in our article that's out about this. I literally just wrote again and again and again and again because I couldn't bear to sit through the video and just count how many times this kid fell.
They played it in court, and his mother is, on the stand crying, and it shows Christopher Gregor's face, and it looks like there's nothing in his eyes to me that makes it appear that he's actually upset, but he's kind of doing this weird breathing thing as if he's trying to manage his emotions or something to appear that he's being impacted by it. And I personally think that it's stressful to him because his freedom depends on a jury's decision, but I didn't see him as being heartbroken over the death of his son.
So Corey was in the custody of Gregor when he received the injuries that took his life. He shared custody with Brianna Micciolo, who's Corey's mother, and she saw some injuries on her son, and she reported them to the New Jersey Division of Child Protection, and a caseworker at NJDCP urged Micciolo to see a doctor. So she asked Gregor to take their son to a doctor, and the doctor who spoke to the son, Corey, the 6-year-old, is reportedly the one who heard verbatim from this kid that his father made him run on the treadmill, quote, because he was too fat. And Corey died the very next day.
Bree, his mother, was sobbing while she watched, as I previously mentioned, while she watched this horrific surveillance footage from the witness stand. And she wrote on a Facebook page called Justice for Corey that the day he passed away, I dropped him off at his father's perfectly healthy and happy, and 6 hours later, he is gone with no explanation.
The footage that was played in court was secured by Court TV, and as we said already, it just shows this kid falling over and over and over again. His dad is standing next to the treadmill, increasing the speed and the incline on the treadmill until he falls, at which point Gregor lifts him very roughly, forces him back on the treadmill, which makes his legs fold because he's not prepared to be shoved on a fast-moving treadmill, and it takes him a minute to get his legs, to get his footing underneath him, and then he tries to run and he falls just over and over and over again. with his father just demanding that he run. And then eventually Gregor decreases the speed and the incline tilt on the treadmill, but this kid just falls over and over and over again.
It's really, really heartbreaking. When he was rushed to the emergency room, the reason he was taken was because he was stumbling, slurring his speech. He was nauseous and short of breath after he woke up from a nap. This 6-year-old kid, he began to have a seizure.
He was having a CT scan, I think, a CAT scan, and that's when his seizure happened.
And he died despite the efforts of medical staff.
In 2021, a forensic pathologist named Dr. Thomas Andrew determined that Corey had suffered from chronic abuse and documented blunt force injuries on his chest and abdomen, laceration and bruising on his heart, laceration and bruising on his liver, and an acute traumatic injury to the heart sometime in the 12 hours leading up to his death. And his autopsy report says he died, quote, from blunt force injuries with cardiac and liver contusions with acute inflammation and sepsis. And his father's defense at trial was they're trying to argue that he died from sepsis and that abuse did not play a role.
One of the sad parts about this is that Gregor had first met his son only a year prior when his son was 5 years old.
That made me think of the Harmony Montgomery case that we covered for the Victoria Evans YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Because that her father had only known her for a little over a year too.
Yep.
After they first met, Gregor, after he first met Corey, Corey came home to his mother with a busted lip, which I guess Gregor claimed that he got hit in the face with a soccer ball.
There are text messages that have come out and disturbing photos that emerged that show some of Corey's bruises, along with his mom, Bree, with the probing his father about the abuse. So these text messages are between Christopher and Bree.
You want to read them?
Yeah.
Let's read them. So we can go back and forth. You want to do a little role reversal here, and I'll be the mother and you can be the father?
Sure.
So Brianna texts Gregor and says, "Hey, not a big deal. I just wanted to let you know that Corey came upstairs upset and almost crying because he was trying to ask you about playing football in high school, and you smacked the ball out of his hand and walked out."
Well, that's a lie. I smacked the ball out of his hand, and he didn't say a word to me when I was leaving before or after that, but I did it as a joke and said bye. Tell him if you... I think here he says, tell him if you wanted, but I think he meant tell him if he wanted to ask me a question. Standing there and saying nothing is not the way to ask.
No, I heard him talking. Like I said, it's not a big deal, but we'll see you later.
I mean, it is a big deal because that's, and this word is censored, I'm assuming it's an expletive, because that's blank and not true. But if Miss racking up all out of his hand, here I think he means and not true. But if smacking a ball out of his hand makes him cry, that maybe he needs to be a little tougher because that's soft tissue. I'll see y'all around 7.
He must have meant that's his... I don't know what that means. Soft tissue?
Yeah,
Can't
I don't
figure
know.
that out. His issue?
Yeah, that's, I guess.
I don't know. That soft would make sense, but not with tissue after it.
Mm-mm.
So then the mother says, he wasn't raised to be unemotional, so he's not going to change. I heard him talking, then something hit the floor, then nothing, so I went down and asked what happened.
That's a big difference than him coming upstairs almost crying. Also, being unemotional is vastly different than being over emotional.
He's not over emotional. You hurt his feelings. He got upset. He's 6 years old. God, this father is just a piece of work.
Yeah, even the text messages are difficult to read in concert with everything else, on top of that. But Corey reportedly died just one day after the courts rejected an emergency filing from his mother, Bree Micciolo, seeking full custody of her abused son.
Yeah, that surveillance footage is just very rough. They did testimony at the trial, and Gregor originally was going to take the stand. His attorney told the court that he had planned to elicit lengthy testimony from Gregor, but I guess they changed their mind and decided that it was a bad idea because Gregor ended up telling the court, "I will not testify," and then his defense attorney told the judge there are no other defense witnesses. And the final witness called by the defense instead ended up being Dr. Michael Baden, who's the forensic pathologist who hosted the HBO series Autopsy. And Baden told the jury that Corey most likely died as a result of severe pneumonia or another sudden natural cause for which there is no explanation.
But his statement contradicts the state's expert pathologist who testified that Corey was the victim of a homicide caused by blunt force injuries to the chest and lacerations to the heart and liver.
I love the idea that your expert witness, essentially his testimony is, hey, he just must have died. We don't really know why. I don't know why I did that voice for him. Foghorn Leghorn. Probably because he sounds like a giant rooster.
He really does, though.
I mean, really, like, this is my expert witness. I have no explanation. That's not a good...
It's not.
The state called Dr. Thomas Andrew, who was the former chief medical examiner for New Hampshire, and Dr. Annette Feingold, an expert in pediatric infectious disease, and both of them testified for the state that Corey did not have pneumonia. Feingold testified specifically that there was no bacteria or infection of any kind in Corey when he died.
The verdict was delivered by a jury on the second day of deliberations after hearing nearly a month of testimony in the 4-week trial.
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning, the jury found Gregor guilty of aggravated manslaughter and child endangerment, but they rejected the murder charge against him, which had a potential sentence of life in prison. And instead, aggravated manslaughter will lead to a sentence of 10 to 30 years, and child endangerment between 5 and 10 years. He's scheduled to be sentenced by Judge Ryan on August 2nd, 2024, according to a State of New Jersey website. So we don't know what the sentence will be yet and whether he'll serve those sentences concurrently. Hopefully he doesn't, because frankly 40 years is not long enough for what he did to this kid.
No, he should get life, absolutely. His attorney said that he plans to appeal the verdict, which isn't really surprising. That's pretty common practice. But he absolutely, the sentencing, I hope, is the maximum allowed for what he was convicted, even though I think he should have been convicted on first-degree murder, but I'm not in the jury, and my opinion doesn't matter.
I also agree that he should have probably been convicted of first-degree murder. If I was on the jury, I think we talked about this before we started recording, but I don't know, the older I get and the more of these true crime stories I write, the sentences that these I will say something that 20 years ago, I would have rolled my eyes when I heard this, but this guy is just scum. I don't see any good reason to keep this guy even breathing, let alone
Nope.
to keep him keep him alive in prison and feed him and give him health care for the next 40 years to then let him back out. This guy killed a 6-year-old kid. And, it wasn't an accident. I mean, he didn't like shoot him in the face, but he willfully and intentionally caused the injuries that led to this kid's death. And the state of New Jersey doesn't have the death penalty, but if I was on the jury, I would have been arguing that I wish that New Jersey had the death penalty, because I would like to sentence this man to death.
This is a slight aside, so I'll keep it brief, but I remember years ago reading Mindhunter by John Douglas, and he talked about an actor, I believe it was for the Silence of the Lambs movie, coming to him to do research for the role of playing a serial killer, playing Buffalo Bill, if I recall, and he was anti-death penalty. And so John Douglas played him some confession tapes, and after that, the actor was not anti-death penalty. I don't know if they may have been confession tapes, they may have been tapes of actual victims in pain or torture, but it was something that was horrific enough. And, we cover horrific stories all the time. I've heard confession tapes and just seen, a lot of us into true crime have, especially researching. We see it all the time. I will never understand people who don't support the death penalty.
This isn't the second story that we talked about covering, but just a couple days ago, we published an article about a mass shooting that happened in a grocery store. And when police were interviewing the kid who committed the mass shooting in the grocery store, he literally told police that he always wanted to kill someone and that he was going to join the army but couldn't wait on that. So instead of waiting to join the army to get sent to a war zone where he'd get to shoot somebody, he took a gun and went into a Kroger and shot at a bunch of innocent people.
Yep.
I was never explicitly anti-death penalty, but I used to be a lot more reticent about its use than I am now. And I still am, in the sense that I think that if you don't have clear evidence that somebody is guilty of a crime, that it's wrong for the state to kill them. If what you're relying on is eyewitness testimony is very compelling to juries, but the human memory is very frail. It's not the most reliable thing. And so even on eyewitness testimony, I think if that's all you're using, then you probably shouldn't be putting somebody to death. But in the cases where you have incontrovertible evidence, especially in the modern era where there's video of this abuse. I've watched it. I watched the video. You guys can too. If you click on the first link in the description of the death of 6-year-old Corey Micciolo, you can watch this video. And in cases like this where there's video of it, death to child abusers.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel.
And I'm sure that prison will not be kind to him, and I at least find comfort in that.
All right, so on to our second story, which is slightly more lighthearted, although it does still involve a number of murders. But this was based on some social media posts that I uncovered during the pandemic. We were sitting at home and I was browsing through Instagram, and I stumbled across this thing. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren of notorious cult leader and serial killer Reverend DeVernon LeGrand had a moment on Instagram when they were praising their serial-killing rapist grandpa as a legend of black excellence and a good family man. And the article is titled, "Serial Killer DeVernon LeGrand Remembered for Heart of Gold," which is literally what one of them says about him.
Young Say-So NDO, also known as Craig LeGrand, made a post calling DeVernon LeGrand He said, here, I'm just going to read the post. Great grandpa, rest easy and continue to watch over your garden, your children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, and all come after we continue to spread your legacy and knowledge. We will always carry your spark, his words. The punctuation in this is abysmal. We all should embrace.
You got to do it like a rap.
I can't.
This guy, Young Seiso NDO, is a rapper.
Right,
So
right, but
you got to do it like a rap.
here, you take it over.
I'm not doing it like a rap, but I'll read it if you want.
Okay.
Great grandpa, rest easy and continue to watch over your garden, your children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, and all to come. After we continue to spread your legacy and knowledge, we will always carry your spark, his words we should all embrace. When my time come, forget the wrong I've done. Help me leave behind some reasons to be missed. And don't resent me. And you're feeling empty, keep me in your memory. Leave out all the rest, leave out all the rest. My great-grandfather, Dr. de Vernon Legrand, leaves behind a legacy. He fathered 77 children with 13 wives, and a slew of grandchildren to the third power, along with anyone else he considered his own. Here's to a legend. Hashtag legacy, hashtag legend, hashtag forever, hashtag love, hashtag neuther, hashtag
No
family,
other. No other.
hashtag respect, hashtag OG, hashtag original, hashtag IG, thanks cousin, Ms. Vans, hashtag black excellence.
All right. That was a lot. I love this part. Along with anyone else he considered his own. I'm like, most serial killers consider the people that they abuse and murder as being theirs. They belong to them.
So a few months later, another of his great grandkids, a guy named Brett Williams, made a post celebrating Legrand, declaring in all capital letters, "His legacy will never die."
Should we tackle this one?
Oh, sure.
All right, Brett Williams writes, over 50 children. Hey, at least he's got punctuation in this. Though I will say
Yeah, but
this
it's all
one,
caps.
this one, every single word is in all, it's all caps. Over 50 children. They never said he created a legacy for good. He helped.
Probably because he killed all those people.
He helped people pay their rent. Well, he killed people, but he helped people pay their rent.
Hey, you know.
Had a master's degree in psychology, and loved his children, as a father should. De Vernon Legrand, my grandfather, a self-made millionaire, businessman, landowner, 58 acres, boss. Media says gangster, not preacher, thug, not gentleman, killer, not healer. Whatever you call him, don't forget the one thing he stood for above all, family. Lived for it, died for it, murdered people for it. I'm kidding. It doesn't say that. Lived for it, died for it. He had 50 children in Brooklyn, New York. It's over 500 of us today. His legacy will never die. Long live Legrands. The Legrand True Story coming soon. Written by B-R-E-T-T Legrand Williams.
Why do you put periods in between all the letters of his name?
No, it's like he wrote B period R period E period T period T.
Yeah.
As if it stands for something. I'm like, what is this?
But then he didn't put a period in front of the last T.
No.
I guess that one doesn't stand for anything.
There's a serious punctuation problem going on here.
Seems like a family problem.
It does.
Here's his granddaughter here, who is also on Instagram, and she's the one who describes the serial killing rapist as having a heart of gold. This is in the replies of a New York City History Hub post related to a documentary that's about a home that belonged to Legrand and his cult. And what this granddaughter wrote, and her punctuation's a mess too, although at least, I was going to say at least she got the punctuation right, or the capitalization right, but she didn't do that either. So she writes, first and foremost, what you're not going to do is make it seem like my family is full of evil, because that is not the case. My grandfather also had a heart of gold, in addition to his heart of evil, I guess she means. His kids never wanted for nothing. His grandchildren never wanted for nothing. We are not ashamed of our past. We are still a loving, God-fearing family.
I feel like in this instance it's better to say nothing. DeVernon LeGrand is believed to have abused, raped, trafficked, and or murdered dozens and dozens of people over the course of his life, mostly teenage girls.
I just have to, again,
Heart of gold.
my family is full of evil. What you're not going to do is make it seem like my family is full of evil, because that is not the case. My grandfather also had a heart of gold.
I like that. He's not just evil, okay?
He was also a great guy.
We didn't want for anything.
In addition to being evil, he was also a wonderful human being. Anyway, LeGrand was born in 1924 in Laurinburg, North Carolina. He moved to Manhattan in 1936. His first arrest was in 1947 for attempted rape. And he also had a suspended sentence for arranging an abortion on his rap sheet. I guess abortion not legal at that time.
Right.
He called himself a bishop as the head of the cult that he started.
That sounds familiar.
It's weird, he started a cult, but then he only made himself a bishop. It's some self-esteem problems.
Gary Heidnik did that.
He called himself a bishop?
Yep. And he started his own church. That was mostly to evade taxes.
Interesting.
Yep. And the name of his church was Long and Obnoxious Stew.
Yeah, LeGrand's church that he was only a bishop in was St. John's Pentecostal Church of Our Lord. And he ran it out of the home in Brooklyn that the previously mentioned documentary was about. He would recruit teenage girls as nuns, and he would then send them out into the street to solicit money for the church when they weren't having sex for money.
I can't laugh.
I mean, the whole thing is it's not
There's
funny
a lot
that
of
it happened.
No,
But
that's not what's funny.
It's so ridiculous in its contradictions that you can't help but laugh.
There's a lot of overlap here with the Heidnik stuff, though LeVernon was much more prolific than Heidnik, but Heidnik also had a church out of his home and, operated somewhat similarly.
So LeGrand was arrested on charges of kidnapping, assault, and firearm possession in 1965, and then in 1975, when he was 50, he was convicted of raping one of his 17-year-old nuns. And then in 1977, he was found guilty of murdering several of his former wives, who died in 1963 and 1970, respectively. And I guess that's what his descendants meant when they said that he was always great to his family.
Took care of everybody.
Several of his sons were also convicted of murder. In 1978, they were convicted for the murders of Jeffrey Miranda and Howard Tippins in what appeared to be a revenge killing for having kidnapped, raped, and held for ransom a prostitute that LeGrand felt belonged to him, according to the Daily News.
The LeGrand stable.
That is what they wrote. Yes.
I've heard people talk about harems and such, but a stable, is that a common
Yes.
terminology used in trafficking?
Yes. Not just trafficking. It's just about him viewing them as property or chattel.
Yeah. That's all very bizarre. So he's abusing these women, right? But they're his property.
And his
so
nuns.
Right. So, and his nuns. So how dare anyone touch them except for him?
They're servants of God.
Nobody is going to abuse these women
Except
for DeVernon.
Right.
And so it's almost like this literally a revenge killing. The whole thing is quite absurd. It's sad, and we're absolutely not making light of it, but this is some Tiger King level documentary filmmaking in the works.
Nuts. So he organized the St. John's Pentecostal Church of Our Lord during the 1960s, in a large townhouse in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. The home was occupied by 11 of his nuns, himself, and their 47 children. Most of the children, possibly all, were Legrand's children.
My God.
It's unclear if they all were, but most of them were, and probably all of them were. This was sort of part of his strategy. He recruited for the church by seducing young women, impregnating them, and then threatening them or their children if they either refused to beg for money, which they usually did around Grand Central Station, or he would send them to New Jersey to sell themselves.
In 1966, Legrand's church purchased 58 acres in the Catskills and converted it into a summer retreat for his followers. So the cult location has been purchased.
I love the Catskills. This has nothing to do with that, but I spent a lot of time there as a kid. I have family that live there, and beautiful, beautiful country. Freezing in the winter, so if you're not accustomed to cold climates, I don't necessarily recommend living there, although I would love it. But beautiful, beautiful place.
I guess he thought so too. State police received complaints from the neighbors alleging child abuse, health violations, wild parties, and indiscriminate gunfire. Gotta love that. And that was sarcasm. And children from the camp allegedly roamed through the
Adirondack. Adirondack.
Adirondack. Okay, I should.
Nah, just keep going.
Okay, Adirondack mountain country, begging and stealing. So I don't want to call this an army, but it really is a cult. Like they bought 58 acres and just sent out dozens of people to beg, to bring back money and whatever they could find and stuff. It was kind of like really just wild. Oh my God, have you guys seen Wild Country? Like this is a YouTube live or something. But this actually somewhat makes me think of Wild Country and the way that it operated. That is a crazy story.
In 1968, police accused Legrand of taking a 23-year-old woman from her home and raping her before she managed to escape. And neither of those cases, either the reports that the state police received or the kidnapping and rape of a 23-year-old, were prosecuted. But then in 1975, he was convicted of bribery and sexual misconduct with a 17-year-old girl. And in 1976, the bodies of two more girls were found in a pond at the religious retreat that he and his cult built in the Catskills. Legrand and his son, Stephen, were convicted of murdering the girls. And then he was kidnapped. He was convicted of another kidnapping and rape, along with a different 20-year-old son named Nakanda. And he got 15 years in prison for that. Well, his son, who I guess is now the head of the family church, got 8 years. And authorities raided the Catskill property in 1968, and they seized a bunch of drug paraphernalia and documented clogged toilets and what they called a general squalor.
It's really unfortunate.
Just a lot of craziness.
Yeah, a lot of the mental illness of one man who had big dreams and homicidal ideation and behavior. Church members Gladys Stewart, aged 16, and her sister Yvonne, 18, testified for the prosecution in Legrand's bribery trial, but they were missing by the time of the rape case. Sus. Informants told the police that the girls were dead, dismembered in the Brooklyn church before being disposed of in the Catskills.
And police didn't find anything when they dug up the ranch in December of 1975, but a few months later, in March of 1976, bones and bits of cartilage were found in Briscoe Lake, and human blood stains were found in the cult's Crown Heights church.
By April, state police were very confident that Legrand had murdered a dozen or more victims dumping some in Briscoe Lake, including 3 of his wives, 2 of Legrand's stepchildren, the Stewart sisters, and 2 male employees of his church.
So then, in 1976, he's indicted on 4 counts of murder, including the Stewarts and 2 of his wives, who were killed in 1963 and 1970, respectively. His son, 26-year-old Stephen Legrand, was charged with murdering the Stewart sisters and the 2 men that were employed by his father as pimps. And they were both convicted together in the Stewart case in 1977, and they both drew prison terms of 25 years to life. And DeVernon Legrand was still serving his life sentence in prison when he died in 2006.
Stephen Legrand, 52, was a citizen of the UK, to which he was deported and returned by plane in 2009 after serving 31 years, despite having spent most of his life in the United States.
Yeah, he was escorted by 2 U.S. Marshals on the flight into Heathrow, where he was handed over to officers from Scotland Yard. I'm sure England was very happy to receive their citizen back.
Right. What's wild about all of this is how widespread it is. I mean, the psychology aspect is interesting, how like it can be passed down genetically and all that, and like just behaviorally what's considered acceptable behavior and not within a family. But all of these family members backing him up is really wild to me. It kind of shows like the power of indoctrination, because holy shit.
Well, all this stuff is still going. In 2010, the New York Post reported that the family business that had been renamed St. Joseph's Church of Christ and Home was now under the control of Legrand's son Nakonda, another convicted rapist we just mentioned a minute ago. And he was under investigation by the state attorney general after photos emerged of Mindy Legrand dressed as a nun out in the street, lying about being an Episcopal sister, raising funds for an orphanage that doesn't exist. And she later claimed she was collecting funds to pay back taxes that the church allegedly owed, which is weird because if they're a church, shouldn't they qualify for nonprofit status? Then they wouldn't have to pay taxes. I guess they didn't get the nonprofit status. Or
They didn't get the memo.
maybe they don't know how that works. They're missing a very important element of this cult thing.
They are. I mean, I don't...
What's the point of founding a church to
Is it officially founded
pimp
as a
out
church?
teenagers if you're not going to be tax exempt?
So weird. It's definitely weird. Even more craziness.
Oops. Sorry, I'm making noise over here.
It's all right. The 4-story Crown Heights townhome at 222 Brooklyn Avenue caught fire around 5 a.m. in May of 2023. So, like, almost about a year ago, just over. It destroyed the interior. The fire also spread to an adjacent residence. Chiyama?
I have no idea. Cheyama.
I love these names, but I don't know.
It could be Sheyama.
Yeah, Sheyama sounds more...
It could be Chiyama. It could be Chama.
Chama Legrand.
Or Chama.
It's probably
Could be Chama.
Chama Legrand. Chama Legrand.
I don't care.
Shiyama told PIX 11 News, quote, "I was devastated when I got the call. We all grew up in that big house. My brothers and sisters. Daddy loved all his children, no matter what people say about him."
Just apparently not the stepchildren that he killed.
I mean, they're clearly, people have been abused. They're clearly, like, just indoctrinated. And, I mean, he seems like a propaganda machine. Just having a conversation with him is like having a conversation with some ministry of propaganda about how great he is. Like, all of these, that's where this conflict comes from. They've got all these, he has just so many kids. All these people are backing him up. And, like, he's not who they think he is.
They're also still out in the street soliciting donations on behalf of a church that they know damn well is fraudulent.
Like, did he really take care of them? Are you really all, you all want for nothing? Is that what what you were saying.
Except for those
'Cause-
back taxes.
Right. I'm like, it sounds like your life would have been better leaving the church and trying to create something for yourself instead of being surrounded by rape and murder cases. And now he's dead. And like, ugh. I don't see it surviving. It's probably all going to splinter off at some point in the next decade or whatever. I could be wrong.
So yeah, that's the story of the serial killer remembered for his heart of gold.
I can't. God. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
So yeah, I think you can appreciate how that was. Again, it's tragic. There are a lot of murders and rapes involved in that, and a lot of trafficked teenagers. But at the same time, something of a lighthearted murder tale
It is. It is somewhat
because of the
lighthearted.
ridiculousness of all of it.
Well, he's such a character. And what people are saying about him is laughable. So yeah, I mean, people are complicated. Some of these stories are complicated. Yeah.
Well, you know, people like to make it seem like the family is full of evil, but he also had a heart of gold. All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of Murder Talk Radio. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we will talk to you next time. Can you say goodbye?
Bye.